Oh, I really hope I got all this right. It would suck if it turns out I am just completely wrong for the entirety of this video. All right, let's go. I just hit level 90 in Phrecia, which means that I got my 2 mystery boxes. And I realized something. I don't know how damage conversion works in this game, really. Like, I kind of know, like you convert one damage type to another, but how does it work? So, I did a little bit of research, and now I'm going to make a video about how damage conversion works. And then at the end, I'll open up those 2 mystery boxes from Phrecia. Hope there's something good in there. So generally, like I said, conversion, and this is what I knew before any of this, inverts your damage types. Surprising, I know. What that means is that through the use of certain skill gems do it themselves, or certain items, or certain support gems, such as cold to fire support, you can convert your damage types to the 5 damage types that there are in the game. There's physical, which is physical. There's lightning, cold, and fire, which are elemental. And then there's chaos, which is chaos. That's about all I knew about conversion. Now, of course, there's more to conversion than just converting. The first thing that I didn't know is that there is an order to conversion. Conversion always starts at physical, then goes to lightning, cold, fire, and then chaos. It does not always happen in that order, but it always happens in that direction. So it doesn't always happen physical to lightning to cold. It could just be physical straight to cold, or it could be physical straight to chaos, but it can never go backwards. You can never go lightning to physical or chaos to cold. There's also gain as extra, which works similarly to conversion, which I also knew about, obviously, and that is similar in that gain as extra can only go in the same direction from physical, lightning, cold, fire, chaos. So that's the absolute basics, like very bare bones of conversion. Something like Ice Shot, for example, converts 60% of its physical damage to cold, which means that there is 40% left over as physical that could be converted to lightning, but the cold could never be converted backwards. Now that, of course, brings the question, what happens if you have more than 100% conversion? What if you, say, convert your physical 60% to cold with Ice Shot, but also 50% to fire through some other means? That'd be 100% conversion, and that could cause some issues. Well, how the game handles that is not complicated, but it varies depending on how your conversion is being done. In this example, with Ice Shot converting 60% of your physical damage to cold, and some other source converting 50% of your physical damage to fire, that fire damage would be scaled back to 40%, because skill conversions always take precedent, and if possible, will keep their full values. That means that no matter what other physical to anything you get, Ice Shot will always convert 60% of physical to cold. I'm back here in the editing booth. I realized I didn't say this at this point. I want to put it here so that you will remember it. When I say conversion from skills, I mentioned Ice Shot and said 60% of physical damage converted to cold, and that will always stay like that. That's actually slightly incorrect. I said that there are, like, if possible, it won't be scaled down, but support gems and also stats that affect specific skills are also considered to be skill conversions. So this Ice Shot, 60% physical converted to cold, and this physical to lightning, 50% physical converted to lightning, do total up to more than 100. Clearly, that is 110%. So this will scale the lightning down. You can see it if I take off all of my conversion gear. This is for a little quiz at the end of the video. You'll see if you get there. But if you look at this now, this has 8 to 20 cold damage because 60% of its physical is converted to cold. If I throw this physical to lightning in, it will have a little bit of extra lightning damage because of that 10% of physical as extra lightning, but you'll notice that the cold damage did go down because it needed to be scaled down so that the skill conversion could fit into 100%. Alright, back to the rest of the video. But that scenario was more than the remaining 40% being taken up by one element. What happens if it's, say, 2? What happens if you have your 60% fizz to cold from Ice Shot, and then 2 non-skill conversions, one for fire that is 50%, and one for lightning that is 50%. Well, on something that isn't Ice Shot, that would be fine. Half of your physical converts to fire, half converts to lightning. But on Ice Shot, 60% is already to cold, and we know that 60% will always be to cold. So what about the remaining 40%? Lightning comes before fire in the conversion line, so does that mean that it would all be lightning and we would ignore the fire? No. What would happen is that both the fire and lightning would be scaled down to maintain their ratio and fill the remaining 40%. This means that our physical damage would be converted 60% to cold from Ice Shot, that cannot be changed, and then 20% would be converted to fire, and 20% would be converted to lightning. Now, of course, this could change if we had, say, cold to fire support. The end number would be different, as some of this physical damage converted to cold would then furthermore be converted to fire, but the physical conversion would be 60 cold, 20 fire, 20 lightning. Same thing goes for something like, say, Tornado Shot. If you had 25% lightning, 25% cold, and 50% fire, everything is fine. But if those numbers add up to over 100%, they will scale down to keep the same ratio to each other. For example, if you had 100% converted to lightning and 100% converted to cold, and somehow 200% converted to fire, that would need to be scaled down by 4 times, as that totals to 400%, which would mean that you would actually end up with 25% lightning, 25% cold, and 50% fire. There are also some sources of the stat gain X% of non-chaos damage as extra chaos damage, and this can apply to every single step of the conversion process. So, for example, if you had 100 physical damage and your projectiles have chained with Gloomfang, you would gain 20 chaos damage. If you had 100% of damage, physical damage converted to lightning, and your projectile has chained, you would gain 20% of your physical damage as extra chaos, and 20% of your lightning damage as extra chaos. And you could do this for every step except for chaos, as it says non-chaos damage. This means you could get, with 100% conversion from physical to lightning to cold to fire, 80% of your damage as extra chaos damage, which means if you could convert fire 100% to chaos, you could have 180% damage with something like Gloomfang. Then, of course, we need to scale all this damage. And this part was the most confusing part to me because it works differently in Path of Exile 2. But I'm not talking about Path of Exile 2, I'm talking about Path of Exile 1. And in Path of Exile 1, any damage that was, at any point during the conversion process, a type, scales with increased damage or more damage to that type. Bit of a weird way to word it, so let's give you an example instead. If you had physical damage that was converted to lightning, and then converted to cold. Say 50%. 50% of physical damage converted to lightning, 50% of lightning damage converted to cold. 100 base hit of physical damage would be converted to 50 physical, 50 lightning, and then that lightning, half would be converted to cold. You would have 50 physical, 25 lightning, 25 cold. Now, if you had 100% increased physical damage, that would scale the entire equation, because all of your damage used to be physical at some point. Told you this stuff was confusing. I accidentally messed it up when recording it this whole time. Okay, so we're going to take our equation of 100 physical damage with 50% of physical to lightning, 50% of lightning to cold, 100% increased physical, and 100% increased lightning. The steps happen that conversion goes first, then the increases, but each damage type remembers each damage type that it used to be, so it gets increased by each of the modifiers. So in this example, we would have 100 physical, converted 50% to lightning, so 50 physical, 50 lightning, and then 50% of lightning converted to cold. We would have 50 physical, 25 lightning, 25 cold. Now, all three of those damage types were at some point physical damage. So the 100% physical would affect the entire thing. So we would have 100 physical, 50 lightning, and 50 cold. Then, what would happen after that is that the 100 lightning, 100% increased lightning, would affect any damage type that was at any point lightning. So the lightning damage and the cold damage, but not the physical. So we would end up with 100 physical, and then our 50 lightning and 50 cold would both be scaled up by the increased lightning. So 100 physical, 100 lightning, 100 cold. I was wrong again, but this time it wasn't about how conversion works. The conversion steps on that are wrong. I just forgot about the difference between increased and more damage. Since you have 100% increased physical and 100% increased lightning, they're both increased. They are additive with each other. So instead of being 100% increased and then another 100% increased, it would actually be 200% increased. So instead of 25 to 50 to 100, it would just be 25 to 50 to 75. But the numbers are wrong, but the calculation order is correct. The way I explained it previously, that is not in this video, which is why I'm re-recording this, I did the increases first, then the conversions, which just confused me, and then I added a clarity point that actually the conversions happen first and then the increases, but I figured, hey, let's just re-record that all to be more accurate to how it actually happens in game. So again, every type of damage in the conversion remembers the type of damage that it used to be and will be increased by the modifiers to each damage type that it is or was. However, it should be noted that each instance of increased or more damage can only affect the entire equation once, since the conversions all happen before any of the increases. So, for example, if we used our previous setup with physical half converted to lightning and half of the lightning converted to cold, if we instead had increased elemental damage instead of increased lightning damage, it would not double dip on the cold. It would increase the lightning and cold by the increased elemental damage once for being elemental, not once for lightning and once for cold, even though they are both elemental damage types. The same thing goes for generic increased damage modifiers. That does not double dip on every step of the conversion. It is just applied once to the increased damage after all the conversions. This is part of what makes the gain percent of non-chaos damage as extra chaos damage so strong if you can get it to work. For what it's worth, and please, if you do not play Path of Exile 2 and do not plan on playing Path of Exile 2, just stop listening while this character is on screen. I'll switch characters for the next part, but if you do not play Path of Exile 2 and you do not plan to play Path of Exile 2, this will just confuse you. In Path of Exile 2, that is not how the increased damage works. In Path of Exile 2, when you convert from one damage type to another, you no longer scale with the original damage type, and you only scale with the second damage type. All conversions happen first in Path of Exile 2. Okay, so a quick recap on how conversion works. Conversion is the process of converting your damage type from one type to another. It is done in a specific order: physical to lightning, to cold, to fire, to chaos. You do not need to take every step in that order, but you must take these steps in that order. For example, physical has to go to lightning, cold, fire, or chaos, but chaos cannot be converted to another damage type. Fire cannot be converted to physical, lightning, or cold, and so on. You can, however, gain percentages of these as extra, which is calculated separately to the conversion state, which means that your physical damage will calculate any physical as extra and then convert to lightning, and then lightning as extra and then convert, and so on. This makes the modifier gain percent of non-chaos damage as extra chaos damage very strong, because it can apply to every step of the conversion if you convert through every damage type. If you convert more than 100% of your damage to another type, for example, 110% of your physical damage to 50% cold and 60% lightning, it will be scaled down to 100% with conversion modifiers from skills taking precedent over conversion modifiers from gear or passives. Conversions from skills, while obviously counting the skill, also includes support gems and any stats that specifically convert a type of damage for a specific skill. And finally, when increasing your damage with increase or more damage modifiers, whether it be lightning, fire, elemental, or generic increased damage, the modifier will affect any damage type that was at any point of the damage type of the modifier. For example, a physical to lightning conversion would be affected by both increases to physical and increases to lightning, but only once per modifier. So a lightning to cold conversion would only be affected once by an increased elemental damage. And I said at the beginning of this video that I will open my mystery boxes at the end, but first, let me give you a little quiz to see if you really understand conversion. Okay, change of plans. You're still getting a quiz, don't get me wrong, you're not getting out of this. But originally, you can go back and look. Earlier on, I had a little cut in where it showed the gear. But some of the gear and the skill gems and whatnot that I had equipped would have required you to have more knowledge about the game than just what I had mentioned in this video. And I feel like that's not exactly the best idea, to have a quiz that quizzes you on things that I never taught you, if I'm the one giving you the quiz, which I am. So instead, your quiz is going to be from the wiki page, the PoE wiki on damage conversions. It is going to be the first example, example number 1, so that you can go into the wiki and you can check to see if your answer was right. But I'm still going to read it out for you here so you don't accidentally spoil yourself on the answer while trying to find it. In this example, a player has a bow with a base damage of 100 physical, with no range to that, it is just 100 physical. The Black Gleam Quiver, which has 50% of physical damage converted to fire, and for this example we will be ignoring the flat fire damage that Black Gleam can add. A pair of Crimsorrow Gloves with 100% of physical damage converted to cold. A Call of the Brotherhood with 40% of lightning damage converted to cold. A level 21 Galvanic Arrow, which has 50% of physical damage converted to lightning. The Galvanic Arrow is supported by a level 1 Withering Touch, which grants 10% of physical damage as extra chaos damage. And the player also has other modifiers that grant them 100% increased physical damage, 100% increased elemental damage, and 100% increased lightning damage. The reason we are using Galvanic Arrow is because level 21 Galvanic Arrow, at the time that this example was put together, had 100% base damage effectiveness. That is no longer the case, but again, for the sake of this, we will pretend that the Galvanic Arrow has 100% base damage effectiveness, and we will be ignoring the added damage from the Black Gleam Quiver. With that setup, what is the total damage of the hit before enemy mitigation? And now, time for the mystery boxes. 2 Third Edict mystery boxes gained from reaching level 90 in the Phrecia 2.0 event. First box, what do we got? We got Molten Charge Skin. Ooh. I currently, for my charges, I have the currency orb, but I quite often use the Rose charges. Let me check if I have a pair of Ralakeshes. I do, and it's old Ralakeshes, which unfortunately is count as having maximum number of endurance charges. It's not old, it's just old. 1 second, I will be right back. Bit of a scuffed setup, but it's just a random Templar that I had, and I have a bow with Aspect of the Cat and a Farrell's Fur. So we get to take a peek at these. Right here, the charge skills. There's the currency orb ones, and I can select any currency except a mirror. I've never used a mirror. There are the rose ones, which I tend to use, which look quite nice. And the ones I just unlocked, the molten charges. Which, while they look quite nice, I can't say they outclass the rose. Let's open that second mystery box. And Goblin Shaman Weapon Skin. I happen to have a bow equipped. That don't look like a bow. Oh no, it does. I was just in stealth. Decent looking bow skin. Can't say I'm disappointed. Invisible old man, though.